Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. It's Friday, and that means it's a return of the Kitchen Table series. Today's video is deck tech number 45, and we are going to talk about 5-color gates. What's up, MTG Burgeoning community? Here we are with deck tech number 45 of our longest running content series, the Kitchen Table series. Number 45 is going to be 5-color gates. So, as is customary generally here during the Kitchen Table series, let's begin with the most important feature of this deck, the mana base. Now, the deck isn't completely filled with gates for our lands, but they're going to be a massive chunk. So let's begin first with 8 basic forests. So we're going to run concurrent with our gates, but there's going to be a massive green theme to help get those lands into play. 8 basic forests, and of course 2 copies of Maze's End. This is going to be an important part of our win condition, as it is our win condition. Maze's End, of course, enters the battlefield tapped. It taps for a colorless, and we can tap 3, tap Maze's End, return it to our hand. We search our library for a gate, put it into the battlefield, put it onto the battlefield, and if we control 10 or more gates with different names, we win the game. 2 copies of Maze's End. All right, so that's 10 total lands, and now here come the gates. We've got 2 of every gate that produces 2 colors. So that means we've got 2 of Azorius, 2 Dimir, 2 Rakdos, 2 Gruul, 2 Selesnya, 2 Orzhov, 2 Boros, 2 Izzet, 2 Simic, and 2 Golgari. It is important to include 2 of each land, just for the purposes of making sure our opponents don't either destroy or exile or steal the only 1 copy of a gate you may put into the deck. So having 2 copies of each is more defensive than anything else. So that's 30 right there. So half the deck are those 30 lands. But we're not done with our mana just yet. Of course, we're going to have a Soul Ring. It is Kitchen Table, so that does mean we're playing with a Soul Ring. Now, unfortunately, many of these lands, 22 out of the 30, enter the battlefield tapped, and it would be a nice way to, reverse that from happening. So let's include Amulet of Vigor, an artifact that costs 1, and whenever a permanent enters the battlefield tapped and under our control, we untap it. 2 copies of Amulet of Vigor. All right, so that really focuses on the land base so far, and it's going to continue that trend with Life from the Loam. Sorcery for 1 and a green, we can return up to 3 target land cards from our graveyard to our hand. Again, this is another defensive spell that we include in the deck for the purposes of making sure that land destruction doesn't completely ruin our end game. This spell, of course, has the dredge mechanic. This is dredge 3, so that reads that if we were to draw a card, instead we put 3 cards from the top of our library into our graveyard, and then we return Life from the Loam from our graveyard to our hand. 2 copies of Life from the Loam. This is going to be very good because with as quick as our deck is, this will allow us to get more cards into our hand, potentially getting, well, maybe not potentially, I mean, it's a 50-50 split between lands and spells in this deck. Life from the Loam will help us to get some lands into our graveyard and then get those lands back into our hand. 2 copies of Life from the Loam. Next up, we are playing with Summer Bloom, 1 and a green again, and that's another sorcery. We may play up to 3 additional lands this turn. 4 copies of Summer Bloom. So as you can see with the first, what do we got here? 2, 4, 8, 9. The first 39 of 60 cards have everything to do with getting these into play as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So now let's continue with ways in which we can increase that process, and that's going to begin with Azusa, Lost But Seeking. 2 and a green. This 1/2 legendary human monk reads, you may play 2 additional lands on each of our turns. Please be mindful, it is a legendary creature, and if your kitchen table game permits the playing of multiple legendaries of the same creature, that's fine, but if not, be warned, if one comes into play and you already have one of them is dying. 3 copies of Asusa, Lost but Seeking. All right, next up, with the same idea in mind of getting some extra lands into play from our hand, we are going to show off the Wayward Swordtooth. 2 and a green, it's a 5/5 dino, and it has the Ascend mechanic. It reads, we may play an additional land on each of our turns. Of course, that has nothing to do with an Ascend mechanic. That's Wayward Swordtooth's static ability. It cannot attack or block unless we have the City's Blessing. And of course, we get the City's Blessing by having at least 10 or more permanents. That is the Ascend mechanic. And that will not be a problem because of the number of lands we're going to get out into play in this deck is going to be exceedingly high. So 2 and a green for a 5/5 dino that lets us play an additional land. It doesn't get much better than that. 3 copies of Wayward Swordtooth. Next, we are going to play with a single copy of Dryad of Elysian Grove. Again, 2 and a green. We may play an additional land on each of our turns. That is the most important feature of this nymph, because lands we control are every basic type in addition to their other types. That's not really going to matter a great deal to us because this deck is predominantly green or colorless. You will see as we get further into the deck tech that isn't exactly 100% true, but it is definitely slanted towards those 2 directions. 1 copy of Dryad of Elysian Grove. Next up, and this one's a bit of a pain. I generally have a pretty high level of disdain for this card because I do not like the idea of forecasting to my opponents what's going into my hand. However, being able to play an additional land from the top of your library is the reason why a copy of Oracle of Moldiah is going to be included in this deck. 3 and a green, it's a 2/2. We may play an additional land on each of our turns. We must play with the top card of our library revealed, and we may play the top card of our library if it's a land card. And that can be very, very helpful because, like I said earlier, we do have a propensity of running through our hand of cards rather quickly. So 1 copy of Oracle of Moldiah. So that is a total of 8 copies of cards that lets us play additional lands during our turn to go with our Summer Bloom full play set as well as our Life from the Loam. So we're setting up a pretty good engine of getting cards into our hand and getting them into the battlefield as quickly as possible so that we can activate Maze's End and win the game. 1 more sorcery spell to include here, and that's going to be 1 copy of Reshape the Earth. 6 and triple green, search our library for up to 10 cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Now, if we have Amulet of Vigor in play when we cast Reshape the Earth, all of those babies are coming into play untapped, then we can activate the Maze's End and win the game. Reshape the Earth is one of our best win conditions in this deck. Now, I do understand the delicate balance of trying to get at least 1 of each of the 10 gates into play, as well as a copy of Maze's End, and then being able to activate it for the win. So we have included some additional cards in this deck that will help to take advantage of having so many gates in play if for some reason Maze's End win condition may fall short in the end. And the first of those is going to be Gatebreaker Ram. For 2 and a green, we love that 2 and a green in this deck, don't we, folks? For 2 and a green, we get a 2/2 sheep that gets +1/+1 for each gate we control. And as long as we control 2 or more gates, which we absolutely will, this gets vigilance and trample. So if we have 6 gates in play, we have an 8/8 vigilant trampling ram for 2 and a green. 4 copies of Gatebreaker Ram. It's just that good in this deck. All right, next up, and as a way to restock our hand, is going to be the focus of the last 8 cards of this deck. And we're going to begin with a 4-of enchantment from Guilds of Ravnica called Guild Summit. 2 and a blue. When this ETBs, we may tap any number of untapped gates we control, and then we can draw a card for each gate tapped this way. And whenever a gate enters the battlefield under our control, we draw a card. So this allows us to continue with getting cards in our hand. Hopefully it's the gates that we need or the spells that we can use to get the gates that we need. We just keep filling our hand, playing the lands, getting closer and closer to a gate count of 10, activate the maze, and win the game. Guild Summit will help to do that as quickly as possible. That's why we're including 4 copies of it in this deck. All right, then those are the first 56 cards. We've got 4 left, and this one may be one of the most important creatures we can put into the deck. It is legendary, so again, similar to what we said with Azusa Lost But Sinking, be mindful of making sure you do not have multiple copies of this creature in play if your metagame does observe the legend rule. And that can only be Tatiova Benthic Druid. 3 green and a blue is a 3/3. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we gain 1 life and we draw a card. So similar to Guild Summit, we're going to fill our hand by utilizing this enchantment, or by utilizing that enchantment. And similar to Tatiova, we are going to play lands, draw cards, gain life, get more lands, play them, rinse, lather, repeat. 4 copies of Tatiova Benthic Druid. And there you have it, burgeoning community. 5 color gates in deck tech number 45 of the Kitchen Table series. Let me know what you think of this deck in the comment section below. And if you've ever attempted to run your own gate deck, I'd love to know which direction you took. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.